Hey everyone, my name is Simon Misiewicz from Optimise Accountants, and I'm pleased to say that I'm with you this evening at my headquarters. I've just noticed my grey background looks like it's reappeared, even though it's meant to be white, would you believe? So I must sort my camera out. Not sure what's going on with that, I have to say, but I will try and sort that out for next time around. It is meant to be a white background. This is white, that's grey. So a bit of a technical issue with that, but good evening to you all anyway. And interesting enough, on YouTube it's even worse, it's slightly different. So I'm going to bring my camera up closer, and then that way I'm hoping that it's going to give me better resolution. So let's see how that goes. But welcome in all. There's a couple of people watching in, so it's good to see. So tonight, as usual, what I'm going to do is just share my screen, so it gives you a bit of an agenda on what is going to be happening in this episode. So let's just roll in as we can. So the first thing I want to do is go to my screen. Okay, I'm looking down, but I will be looking at you in a second. So this is obviously the Monday night property Q&A. So if you do have any questions about property investing in general, or indeed if you've got any property tax questions, I am here to help you. Simple as that. That is all it's all about. So it's me trying to help you understand anything that you have questions or concerns over property investing and property tax. And I will be answering both sets of questions for you live this evening with anything that you will type in below. So make sure you type in any questions in below this video. If you're watching on a tablet, then it might be over to the, which way would it be? Over to the right-hand side, I believe. So feel free to type those messages in, and I will get back to you as I can. The next thing I'll be going through tonight is in the news. So this is whereby I will be talking to you about certain items that are now appearing in the news. There's some interesting articles that have been written in the recent weeks, no different this week either. So I'll be pleased to share with you what I've been reading and hopefully share some insights and hopefully learn from you as well what's been happening in the newspaper. Maybe if you can drop a line in terms of what's been interesting from articles that you have read as I go through the ones that I've gone through. So let's talk about that. And then we'll be doing client FAQ as well. So these are client frequently asked questions and typically what answers we'll be providing to those clients. So I'll be going through that, but let's start with what's in the news. And to do that, I'm going to share with you my Google screen so we can go into that. And you'll notice I've got a few videos in here. Here we are. So here's a couple of articles that I'm going to share with you now. So the first one was by What Mortgage. So What Mortgage, they wrote an interesting article about buy-to-let, more options for professional landlords. And a quite a good article by What Mortgage. But what's really attracted me to this article and left me with some sound bites was this one again, focusing on limited companies and being tax efficient. Section 24 does not affect properties that are held in a limited company structure at all. So that can only be a bonus and a benefit to you. And I would also say that my laptop's going crazy at the minute. The fan's just gone off. That's because my laptop is now about 100 degrees. I don't know what's going on with it. Has anyone else got a Mac that just seems to be burning up? This is a new MacBook Pro, and if I touch this dashboard, it's actually melting my hand. It can't be safe, can it, really? So Apple, what is going on? Anyway, back to what we're meant to be talking about, which is limited company structures and the fact that Section 24 does not affect the those kind of properties at all. I've just pressed the mute button, so apologies for that. And I'm just going to move this camera even slightly further north of me, just so I can get that perfectly on me. Good. So in terms of using a limited company, good for Section 24. Interest slightly more in a limited company, typically 1% to 1.25%. So you do need to look at the positioning of, well, I might save some tax using a limited company structure, which I've talked about so many times. I'm not going to go into that again. but do always balance up the savings you make in tax in the company structure versus the extra mortgage interest costs that you will have because you are using that limited company structure. Typically, like say, between 1. And now it's now 1%, I guess, 1% and 1.5% more in the limited company structure than it is in your own name. Interestingly enough, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that the Mortgage Works, or TMW, recently brought out a mortgage product at 2.89%. So it's worth having a look at your mortgage broker, having discussions with them to find out what rates they could get you in a limited company structure. So that was quite a good article. Like I say, that was by What's Mortgage, so it's worth having a look at that. Yahoo, typically I don't really read Yahoo stuff, but Yahoo Finance came up with something called Rents Are Booming for These Buy-to-Let Investors. Time to jump in or buy this property stock instead. And what's been interesting for me is the launch of the, what I would call the build to rent schemes, and you can personally invest into those, into the shares of that company. So rather than being a direct investor in property, you could be an indirect investor in property, meaning that you can just buy the shares of that limited company. And I thought what was interesting about this whole article was the fact that is a balanced view, talking about rent boom of 8% in certain universities areas. So that's worth having a look at. But they also mentioned about a better property play, which is to buy shares in Unite Group, which is on the London Stock Exchange. So it's always worth having a balanced view to say, well, do I want to be aggressively involved in property, bricks and mortar, buying it in the capital growth as well as the returns I can make in property, or do I buy shares instead, whereby it's truly passive? You don't get involved in letting agents, you don't have to get worried about tenants, you don't need to worry about paying stamp duty, land tax, but you may not get the returns that you possibly could by doing direct. And I'm saying possibly, because there are many landlords out there that don't make the returns that the shares could benefit from. So it's worth having a look at these two aspects. Do you become direct, buying into the property investment itself, or do you go the indirect route, which is buying the shares? Personally, I think it's worth dabbling in both. Sometimes it's good to see how much you compare yourself, and making an investment in both helps you understand, well, where you're going right, where you're going wrong, and interestingly enough, after a couple of years, where should you put your money into more in the future, by comparing your results of yourself investing in property versus the amount of returns you got from your shares in other companies. And then you can make a more informed decision. So I thought it was quite a balanced view in terms of an article. So great to see Yahoo Finance writing that. So do head off over to that, where it says rents are booming for these buy-to-let investors. Quite a good article, I have to say. And that was, funny enough, done by the Motley Fool. Now, the Motley Fool is one of those article writers that's pretty much professing about buying shares in property instead, normally. So do take that into consideration. Another article came out from Simply Business. Again, good one. A good article a couple of days ago. 5 ways the next Prime Minister could help landlords. And all they've done is just talked about the different schemes that they think that the government, the new PM, if you like, could help property investors. It's something that's been kind of subject to much debate, especially when you talk about rent controls, which is what Corbyn is talking about, making sure that there are rent controls to prevent people from increasing rents. So that's Corbyn versus Conservative, which is talking about, you know, maybe this article is suggesting maybe killing it off, so being the total opposite of what the Labour Party is. Root out criminal land. I don't know why I'm going backwards, but I'm going backwards now. Root out criminal landlords is something that I hold dear as well. There are lots of, I feel that we as landlords, professional property investors that do everything above board, as in legal, We are the ones that are getting stiffed by Section 24 mortgage interest rate tax reliefs. We're getting hits with legislation changes. We've got licensing fees. We've got HMO license fees to pay out. And Section 8, which has been abolished pretty much and kind of going through different new routes. I've often felt that the government aren't doing enough to get the illegal landlords, which are getting away with all of this because they're simply not telling the government they're owning properties and then renting them out, which I find really frustrating, bearing in mind that they must know which ones have got buy-to-let mortgages. That's a good indicator, first of all. If you've got a buy-to-let mortgage, well, hold on a minute, have they declared their tax? Well, that's the first thing I would do if I was the government. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, get on with it. And the second thing of all is, if you are a landowner with your name on the land registry, but you've got different people on the council tax, as in the voting, then surely that's another way to see if you are not telling the government that you've got some property rented out. Again, something I think should be simple enough. So I think that there's a couple of things that this article really highlighted. None of this, by the way, are initiatives that the government are considering. It's just what this article from Simply Business suggested that the Prime Minister could help landlords. And there was quite a move away from the cynicism, this cynical kind of negativity towards landlords in recent times in articles. And I feel quite refreshed and positive when I'm reading these articles, because it does feel that they are looking at landlords now as one of those punched victims that's, you know, they feel sorry for. And to be fair, if they're responding in this positive energy, I will say, I'm punch drunk, so please do help us out. Get the positive vibes out there so that the government can stop hitting us. And Accountancy Today was talking about rent increase, so going by 145%. So this is people that are avoiding, which is going back to my previous point, of 145% of people that have not told HMRC that they're receiving rental income. So it's increased by 145%. I'm not sure how they know this really, but that's what this particular article was talking about. But it has been suggested that the amount of unpaid taxes from the rogue landlords is gone up from 21 million to 42 million, which is a huge increase. And it's that I think is the thing that the government really should focus on, not trying to attack landlords, but focusing on rogue landlords that literally are breaking the law and not paying tax. This article, this is from Letting Agent Today. Something I do like is Letting Agent Today. They do write some fab articles. This one in particular focused around the capital gains tax changes, which are going to come into play around about April 2020. So come April 2020, not only are we going to see changes to how private residency relief is calculated, we're not only going to see the changes to lettings relief and how that is calculated, but you will also now have to pay CGT 30 days after you sold the property. And hark, who is going to do that calculation? Not you, not your accountant necessarily, but the solicitor. That's right, the solicitor is going to do CGT. Now, I have to be honest, I have seen in recent times where solicitors have got stamp duty land tax wrong, never mind capital gains tax. So if they're now going to do the more complex side of things, which is capital gains tax, you'll end up paying more capital gains tax than you probably should, because they are on that edge of the curve in terms of being prudent, reserved and risk averse. You know, so you have to be careful that they'll end up charging you more capital gains tax, and you will then need to claim back the excess on your personal self-assessment, because you may need to prove that you've got capital items which you have not factored into the original calculation by the solicitor. So things to think about. I do think there's going to be a huge wave of errors because landlords simply are not aware that this change is coming into play, that CGT will need to be paid 30 days after the property is sold. I'm so sorry, but I could not help it anymore. I needed that drink. It's thirsty work reading all these news articles for you, I have to say. Mortgage Solutions also wrote something about the Boris Johnson and how he has been considered. Now, I don't know how much this is true, but maybe if you could write in the comments box below if you have heard these rumors, these stories as well, because according what he was saying, according to the trade body, the Association of Accounting Technicians, which I would say that AAT is down here. Then you've got CIMMA, ACCA, ACA, or ICAW. And then next to these, I would say there's another form of bodies, which is the CIOT, which is Chartered Institute of Taxation. I've not heard anything like this come from them. Now, maybe I've just missed it, but it'd be interesting to see from your side whether that's, you have heard this, because it was saying that AAT has revealed conversations and discussions with Boris Johnson, who, bearing in mind, is the runner for PM, has suggested that stamp duty land tax should be paid by the seller of the property, not the buyer. I mean, that's crazy. They'd have to reconfigure the entirety of stamp duty land tax, because the 3% SDLT surcharge, how would that come into play? And if you're buying a company, you've got the 15% tax rate if you're using it as a home inside that company. All of those things would need to be abolished, surely, and then have to be reconfigured for the seller to pay SDLT on top of the CGT if they're selling a property. It would make it unwise for people to sell buy-to-let properties, wouldn't it? So I can't imagine that that's going to happen. But have you heard this rumor? If so, please do write in the comments box below where you have heard this rumor, how much is true behind this, because I have no idea of this story and how it's come about. And it's come out of Mortgage Solutions. So, the one thing I would say about this, I couldn't find any link to the AAT about this. So I can't validate the claims being made here, but it was an interesting one. Another one that came up in Property Wire is stamp duty change is the top wish list from buy-to-let investors. And it just gave a section here of the number of people of being asked, what changes would you like as a buy-to-let investor? And the answer was, well, we just want a fairer way of how stamp duty land tax is calculated. And I think it's pretty much talking about the 3% SDLT surcharge, which we all agree that this 3% SDLT surcharge is rather unfair. It is targeted. Not only that, but I would say that people should also be focusing on CGT. If you are selling shares, for instance, the top tax rate you'll be charged is 20%. Oh, sorry, is 20% versus 28% if you're a high rate taxpayer and you're selling a property, so you're paying 8% more. So it's worth us challenging the government when there is going to be a shake-up, whether it's a new PM or a new government altogether. If there's a new government and Labour get in, I think we're screwed, to be fair. I think we're going to find even more tax changes which are going to affect us. But if we got a PM from Conservative to consider new tax changes and put those in place to help reduce SDLT and CGT, I think that would be a real top benefit to all of us. Mortgage Finance Gazette talks about unprecedented fall in buy-to-let mortgage interest rates. For many, many weeks, I've been talking about the more product range that you can get from the mortgages. And basically, the rates are coming down on those products. The amount that they're willing to borrow has gone up as well. So it's quite a competitive market now with mortgages. And I think you can get quite good rates, but you've got to speak to your broker first, who are financially regulated to do so. And for you to work out which rates are going to be good for you, whether it's in your own name or indeed, which most people are looking at, is buying property inside a limited company and finding the best rates. But there are so many product ranges there, but they are saying that the fixed rates are coming down. And it's just an interesting article to see how much competition is going inside of that industry. And again, property-wise, we talk about the same thing in terms of rates falling down. And this one, I'm not sure what's going on here, but the property reporter talks about the IMMA urges the government to suspend further intervention on buy-to-let. This is another organisation alongside CIOT, Chartered Institute of Taxation, to call upon the government to stop the intervention of tax changes for landlords and buy-to-let property investors. So we're all asking for a little bit of calm from the government to stop all these tax changes, because most people are trying to catch up in terms of all these tax changes and then bring flurry after changes. And maybe you listening out, are you finding the same? Are you kind of sick to death with tax changes? Maybe put down in the comments box below. Or more importantly, which tax change has caused you the most frustration and why? So let me restate that question for you. Which tax change has come into it which caused you the greatest amount of frustration and why? It'd be interesting to see your comments in this section as well, just to give us a bit more of a consensus in terms of what you're feeling out there. And why buying? This is great. Our Buy Association are doing some cracking articles. I've been reading their articles now for the last 6, 7, 8 weeks. And they talk about how buying an off-plan property buy-to-let investment is worth considering. And they talk about the blueprint, but basically, if you're buying a property off-plan, you can get it cheaper than when it is finally built, because you're providing all that finance, that input to the property before it's up and running. So it's a good article for you to read in terms of what I've been saying. But that's pretty much in the news. That's the highlights. It's been a bit quieter, I have to say. It took me a long time to gather this information together. The buy-to-let news hasn't been as good. But don't forget, and I just noticed that it's not come up on my screen, but if you want to get your news articles on a daily basis, don't forget that you can hop over to www.optimiseaccountants.co.uk, and I will typically send out a daily news item of the things that you can get. There's loads of videos that are on there as well. You can see a couple there by Liam Ryan, Simon Misiewicz. There'll also be Sam Leeds as well. So there's a couple of videos there for you to watch. And it just talks about the kind of different types of tax. So have a look at that, and you can hopefully get something daily in your mailbox. And that's all we'll send out to you. It's just news items. Okay, so let's just hop over to the page. So Yoko, hello, Yoko, good to see you. There's no other questions. So, but if you found this section useful in terms of news items and you're happy to get more news items like this, give me a thumbs up on the video just below, just so I know that it's good. And equally, if you've got any questions right now in terms of the news items that you've read so far, please type in those questions in the comments box right now, and then I know I can answer those in this section. I'm just going to go over to the video itself. So live chat, I might have missed something. No, that's all good. Okay, just making sure I missed anything. Okay, let's go into the next section, which is, oops, hold on a minute. I've just realized what I've done here, and I've got to switch. So let's go into in news. We've done that, so we're going to go to the news section. But slowly off the mark here. Client FAQ. So these are questions that clients have been asking in the last week, and I've taken the section of those just to find out which one's a bit more interesting and to share with you what I would be recommending, and our lead accountants will be as well. So this is a wrong one. I'm just going to go to client FAQ. So this week, people are talking about capital allowances. So capital allowances is, let's just imagine, actually, we're buying a property, and typically I will talk about what costs are allowable to offset against your property income. And typically you can have things like replacement of bathroom suites, replacement of windows, replacement of kitchen cabinetry, white goods, your carpets, since there's been quite a few changes on taxes, so you can now claim carpets, the replacement, your painting and decorating, any repairs that you carry out, that is all allowed to be offset against your income. And that's what I would call the replace, repair, renew. From a marketing perspective, it's easy to understand. RRR, repair, replace, renew, 100% allowed against your marketing spend. But capital allowances is slightly different, whereby you can claim on other items. And two big things I always talk about capital allowances from a property investor's perspective. There are two main elements. There's the plant and equipment, and then fixtures and fittings. And plant and equipment typically is everything to make the property run. So you've got your heating, your lighting systems. You've also got your water systems going through as well. And these may be things that you can't see. So with repair, replace, renew, typically you can see the wall that you're painting, and you can see the furniture that you're replacing. But these items, plant and machinery, are things that are hidden. So you can't actually physically see, because you can't physically see the pipes. You might take an estimated guess, but actually, you know, you'd need someone like a RIC surveyor to come out to see the property, and for them to give you a report to say these are the items they can claim against. Fixtures and fittings, so both integral. I'm talking about kitchen units here and bathroom suites. So those are the two main focus areas of capital allowances for property investors. And what you can claim them on is items used in your business. So if you're a service provider like us, accountancy services, and you've got your own building, then you can claim capital allowances on certain aspects. HMOs is an interesting one, whereby you can carry out about 5% of your capital allowances of the property value. So not a great deal. There are so many changes that took place since 2003, which prevented the use of capital allowances on a HMO for students or professional lets. So since 2003, it's not been such a good idea. Basically what it means is that HMOs can only claim shared areas, and I'm talking about hallways, nothing else. So rooms aren't counted anymore since 2003. So you talk about the hallway, landing, stairs, and that kind of thing. But rooms such as bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchen area, living room areas, they're no longer able to be claimed for capital allowances. I know there's some organizations that are still using capital allowances before the 2003 tax changes, which is a naughty. They shouldn't be doing that, but there are many organizations that are doing it. So you do need to be very, very careful, because ultimately they will charge you on the tax savings that they make. So therefore commission and the objectivity of those companies, I would question. And ultimately it is you, the taxpayer, that would have to pay tax back to HMRC if it's found to be a HMO and you've claimed too much tax on capital allowances. Okay, now the other one is holiday let service accommodation. Boy, that is a huge amount of change in the industry. Lots more people are doing Airbnb, Booking.com products, whereby they're converting even buy-to-let standard properties into a holiday let, which is a service accommodation for all intents and purposes. And you've got holiday makers renting out your property, and you can charge them, I don't know, between £25 and £250 per night, which is a lot more than you can on a standard buy-to-let. Now, the capital allowances is very interesting on this area, because you can make a claim of 20% to 35% of the property value. With service accommodation and holiday lets, you can look at the entirety of the integral furnishing, such as bathrooms, kitchens, but also the plumbing, the heating, the lighting systems of that property. And typically about 25% of that property value may be claimed at capital allowances, which then could be offset against your property income. So a huge amount of capital allowances to be claimed. The big thing for to bear in mind is that you can also get an annual investment allowance of up to £1 million. I have to check that. I'm sure, yeah, it is 1 million. So if you buy a property of £200,000, and you can claim up to 20% on that of that capital allowance. So even if, let's say, it's £50,000 capital allowances, that's a huge amount of cost that can be offset against your income. And to boot, if you're carrying out services such as a bed and breakfast or a holiday through hotel, then you can claim some of those capital allowances as well and offset that against your employment income. So if you're, for instance, if you've got a £50,000 loss, which I'm showing you on the screen, that £50,000 loss can be offset against your employment income, provided you're earning that amount of money, and £20,000 may be claimed back from HMRC because of this sideways movement of loss. But again, please do note that you have to be providing services. It can't be just a normal standard HMO or service accommodation. You have to be providing services for that to be claimed back now. Again, these are the tax changes that come into play. Holding companies is one of those that also was very, very popular. So we're not just talking about a standard limited company. We're talking about a structure whereby you might have 1 company, 2 companies, 3 companies, and above that you might have your holding company. And why might you have a holding company? Well, it's sometimes a good idea to have your holding company that owns your subsidiaries. One subsidiary being your buy-to-let to hold properties, and then your flips and trade properties, whereby you're taking a property, you're flipping it on. The reason for that is, and one of the things I mentioned about the upsides, is let's imagine that you've got this holding company at the top, you've got your buy-to-let property investments, this is owned by that holding company in one hand, and then on the other hand, you've got this trade. Imagine you tried to do this flip, but it didn't work out, and you thought, well, we may as well keep it. Well, by holding company structure, you can then transfer that property over here and then use that company again as a flip, or just close it down, because you can literally sell it from one place to another. And there's great VAT savings, there's some great capital allowances savings you can make, there's some stamp duty land tax savings you can make by using this structure as well. So it's sometimes good to use holding companies. Lots of clients will talk about it. One big thing I would say about the one structure that came out, a question that did come out recently, is a JV structure. So I've just got you an example. Hopefully you can see that just there. I'm not going to go to the archive, but here you are. So let's imagine you've got three holding companies. Sorry, you've got one holding company. Scrap that. What am I talking about? Let's start from scratch. If you had company A, company B, company C in your name, and you were 50% whole shareholder in each of those companies, and then your profits that came out from those companies, 100,000, 100,000, 100,000. So collectively, there's £300,000 worth of profits in those companies. You and your JV partners share 50-50. So you've now got 50,000, 50,000, 50,000, which equates to £150,000 in total. If those shares are owned in your name, you've now got an income tax liability on those dividends of £150,000. And if you're a high rate taxpayer, you soon will be an additional rate taxpayer, which means you're paying 38.1% income tax on those dividends. Not a great place to be in, especially if you wanted just to reinvest that money. So having a holding company which now owns company A, company B, company C, well, that's a better play, because the dividends, those 50,000 from each of those SPVs, would be rolled up to your holding company, and it is held there. There is no tax liability of using these kind of structures that we've just talked about. But then when you do take that money out of the holding company into your own personal name, you control how much money you're extracting out of that holding company, and indeed how much tax you'll be subject to as well. If you wanted to reinvest that money, let's say you took the full £150,000 and you open a new company, company D, then there would be no tax, because you're not taking it out, you're investing that money, therefore you're not going to be subject to any tax. So it's some good things that are coming out of using holding company structures. We're using a lot of tax advice on this area, and indeed some accountancy advice as well. Some of the downsides is that you lose entrepreneur's relief because these SPVs aren't owned by you, they're owned by the holding company. You cannot no longer claim the entrepreneur's relief because that is going up to the holding company, not you individually. And yet it's another limited company, so you've got extra fees with it, you've got accountancy fees, you've got more responsibilities, extra administration, etc., etc. So it's an interesting view. Well, last week was an interesting perspective whereby a lot of focus was around holding companies, and some interesting aspects from capital allowances too, because of the way that they're using capital allowances within holiday lets, especially now that area is beginning to grow. I think capital allowances is definitely one area that will be seeing an improvement on. So that pretty much will wrap up my questions from that. But if you do have any questions now, I will be reading those out and going through those. So let's see what kind of questions are coming out. So Yumang is saying it's all work, it's all work, including painting, garden, cleanup, and capital expenses on a property flip. So if you're doing a property flip, any expenses that you incur on that will be allowable to be offset against the sales proceeds of that property you made. So it will, while my screen's going really weird, I'm not sure what's going on with it. I'm going to just take my screen off for a second. Just bear with me a sec. So I'm going to take off my share for now. In fact, I'm just going to stop share. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, stop. And there we go. So hopefully it's just come back to me. So there we go. So yes, the answer to that, if you're doing a flip, all costs of that property will be allowed to offset against your income. So yes, so that's pretty straightforward there. Okay, so that is concluding my points here. So thank you ever so much for listening in to me. I'm finishing early because there's not many questions. There's not much news items coming out either. So, and there's not many questions, which is surprising. You're pretty quiet today, whether it's the summer, and I'm now getting the summer kind of vacations, people disappearing off the ether. Yeah, so I'm not seeing many people on here at all now. So it just leads me to say that next week, don't forget, I will be doing property Q&A live as usual, and I'll be doing that between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. The one thing I am looking to do, which I'm just going to do a new share, I'm just going to take you to my page now, because I want to share something with you that's happened in the last week or two, is my own page, or our own page. So if you go to Optimise Accountants, we have now got over 1,000 subscribers. Hey, we've hit the targets. So as a way of saying thank you, I am now looking to do a live 2-hour property tax workshop, free. So let me restate that. I'm looking to do a 2-hour property tax workshop for you for free. That's right, just to say thank you, because you guys have made this 1,000 subscribers happen. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This is a personal thank you to you guys. And I now want to give up my time to really just push us forward into 2019, 2020, to help you make more money from property, but also for you to be more tax efficient as well. And the way I can do that is to do a live workshop with you. So I'm going to do a couple of hours with you. So if you know what areas of tax you need support on, please do write that in the comments box below. I'm going to be kind of promoting this. So I will be doing this event around about August, September time. So I'll be doing this free event. It'll be YouTube live, and it will be done in August or September. But before that, I want to make sure I get as much ideas in terms of what you are needing help on, so I can deliver the very best content for you in that free 2-hour session. So this is my way of saying thank you ever so much for giving me your subscribers. numbers, and let's now push on to 3,000 subscribers, which I promise I will do a 3-hour property tax workshop. So let's push open the number of subscribers. But like I say, I just want to say thank you ever so much for that. And don't forget to stay tuned for next Monday between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. when I will be doing another property live workshop with you. So again, thank you ever so much for joining me tonight, and I wish you a great evening and a fantastic week also. Many thanks and good night.